Thank God, this incredible HFY masterpiece found you today. Witness the legend starting now. The Nexus Prime Academy existed in the kind of location that suggested its founders had serious trust issues with planetary surfaces, suspended in a perfectly calculated orbit around a collapsed star that had died approximately 4 billion years ago. The station represented the galaxy's commitment to controlled environments, predictable outcomes, and the belief that if you could just gather enough data, nothing would ever surprise you again. This philosophy had worked spectacularly well for roughly 3,000 standard years. The Academy itself was a masterpiece of paranoid architecture. Every corridor had exactly 2.3 m of clearance determined by committee to accommodate 99.7% of known species. Air composition was monitored by 17 redundant systems. Gravity plating was calibrated hourly. The whole structure was essentially massive spreadsheet with classrooms, and everyone involved was very proud of this fact. The Galactic Confederation had spent millennia perfecting their approach to higher education. They developed the Sentient Species Danger Index, a comprehensive algorithm that rated every known sapient species on a scale from 1 to 1,000 based on approximately 600 variables, including average strength, aggression markers, predator ancestry, technological capability, and something called chaos tendency that was mostly used to justify whatever the committee had already decided. The Yanari, a species of crystallized energy beings who communicated through carefully modulated radiation, scored a 12. They were very polite and had never started a war because they'd mathematically proven wars were inefficient. The Draxians, reptilian descendants of apex predators who'd conquered their planet through superior intellect and coordinated pack hunting, scored a 340. Dangerous but predictable. Their entire civilization ran on mathematical principles and logical frameworks that made sense. Humans scored 847. This number had caused significant debate. The initial assessment team had wanted to classify them at 290, which seemed reasonable for a species that had only achieved faster than light travel by accidentally discovering a wormhole while looking for oil. But then the committee had actually read the reports, all of them, including the appendices. Earth was a Class 12 Deathworld, which was already concerning. Class 12 meant the planet was actively hostile to life through multiple simultaneous mechanisms. Earth had weather systems that could level cities, tectonic activity that regularly reshaped continents, a magnetic field that occasionally reversed for fun, an atmosphere that produced lightning storms powerful enough to vaporize anything they hit, and an ecosystem where everything was either poisonous, venomous, or had specialized anatomy for killing. Humanity had responded to all this by developing agriculture, philosophy, and competitive cooking shows. The committee had reviewed Earth's dominant predators, creatures called bears that could weigh 600 kg and run 50 km/h, saltwater crocodiles that had remained evolutionarily unchanged for millions of years because they'd already achieved perfection in murder, box jellyfish that were nearly invisible and could kill you in minutes, mosquitoes that killed more humans than any other creature through disease transmission, which meant humans had to develop immunity to approximately 10,000 different pathogens just to survive. Childhood. Then there were the plants. Earth had plants that could kill through touch, plants that could kill through smell, plants that could kill if you ate them, and plants that produced fruits, specifically to trick animals into spreading their seeds through a process that involved consumption and defecation. Humans had looked at these plants and decided to cultivate them for food. The psychological profile was even worse. Humans had something called adrenaline, which was essentially a biological combat stimulant that their bodies produced automatically in response to threat stimuli. They had a fight or flight response that could transform a peaceful individual into a threat elimination machine in approximately 0.3 seconds. Their pain tolerance was absurd. Their capacity for improvisation under pressure bordered on probability defying. And then there was human education. The Confederation's Education Committee had nearly disbanded after reviewing Earth's school curriculum. Apparently, human children were subjected to something called physical education, where they were systematically trained in running, climbing, throwing, catching, and various forms of supervised combat. They had recess, where children established social hierarchies through physical competition. They had sports, where humans would voluntarily subject themselves to injury for entertainment. One sport involved throwing a ball at each other's heads until only one team remained. Another involved full contact collision while wearing minimal armor. A third involved hitting a small ball with a stick and then running in a predetermined pattern while other humans tried to physically intercept you. The committee had classified human education as systematic preparation for warfare, disguised as childhood development. The danger index of 847 was actually compromise. 3 members had advocated for breaking the scale, all of which brought us to Raina O'Connell, second-year quantum mechanics student, occasional rule breaker, and currently the only human enrolled at Nexus Prime Academy. Raina had the kind of background that suggested someone in the admission office had stopped reading her application after perfect entrance exam scores. She was from Lagos, had grown up with Earth's gravity trying to compress her spine, had survived the standard childhood diseases that would hospitalize most galactic species, and had the casual physicality of someone who'd grown up playing in an environment where the weather could kill you. She wore her hair in long braids that violated at least 3 station regulations about unnecessary mass distribution, stood at approximately 1.7 m, and had the disconcerting habit of smiling at people who were trying to intimidate her. By human standards, Raina was pretty normal. Decent at basketball, mediocre at chemistry, excellent at mathematics, and had that particular combination of intelligence and poor decision-making that characterized most university students. By galactic standards, Raina was a ticking time bomb wrapped in friendly packaging. The academy had tried to prepare for her arrival. They'd installed reinforced furniture in her dormitory after calculating that standard gravity-adjusted chairs might not support human muscle density. They'd created a special meal plan after discovering that human food was classified as biohazardous by 14 different species. They'd even assigned her a species integration counselor who'd lasted 3 weeks before requesting a transfer, citing existential questions about universal safety protocols. Renee had made friends despite all this. A few brave students had discovered she was actually pretty fun to hang out with, if you could get past the instinctive fear response. She studied hard, helped classmates with problem sets, and had only accidentally injured someone once when a handshake had resulted in a fractured manipulator appendage. She'd felt terrible about it. The problem wasn't Renee. The problem was that the galaxy ran on predictability, and Renee's existence challenged approximately 3,000 years of carefully constructed assumptions, which brought us to advanced quantum mechanics, Professor Thelian's upper-level course. That was generally considered the hardest class at Nexus Prime. The final problem on the mid-cycle examination had been designed to be unsolvable. Not difficult, not challenging, actually mathematically unsolvable within the time constraints provided. The problem was a test of knowing when to give up. 47 students had correctly identified the problem as unsolvable and received full marks for their explanation of why. One student had solved it. Raina had looked at the equations, recognized that the traditional approach wouldn't work, and had done something that made mathematicians across 3-star systems deeply uncomfortable. She'd guessed, not randomly, but using what humans called intuition, which was basically pattern recognition, mixed with unconscious calculation and whatever chaotic neural processes happened in human brains. Her guess had been correct. Professor Thelian had spent 3 hours verifying her work, another 2 hours questioning his understanding of mathematics, and finally accepted that somehow, impossibly, a human had solved an unsolvable problem by essentially feeling her way to the answer. The Draxians in the class had not taken this well. Draxians were, in their own estimation, the galaxy's premier mathematicians. Their entire civilization was built on logical principles and numerical perfection. Their language had 17 different words for proof, and only 3 for emotion, 2 of which were considered profanity. They'd achieved spaceflight by calculating the exact parameters needed, and then building engines to match. Their art was geometric. Their music was algorithmic. Their philosophy was basically applied mathematics. They were really, really good at being right through superior calculation, which made Raina's intuitive solution deeply offensive on a cultural level. There are 8 Draxian students in advanced quantum mechanics. 5 of them accepted the situation with varying degrees of grudging respect. 2 didn't care because they were busy with their own research projects. 1, however, had decided this represented an existential threat to Draxian intellectual superiority. His name was Zix Tao, and he had the kind of rigid thinking that came from being praised for mathematical ability his entire higher life without developing any other personality traits. He was tall even for a Draxian, which meant roughly 2.1 m of scaled muscle and intellectual insecurity. His scales had a greenish tint that indicated high copper content in his biology, and his eyes had the cold calculation of someone who decided that problems could be eliminated through sufficient planning. He'd spent 3 days after the exam results were posted calculating exactly how to handle the human problem. His conclusion: direct confrontation in a location, without witnesses, applying sufficient pressure to force academic withdrawal, with violence as a calculated backup option. Zixtal had 3 friends who'd agreed to help, not because they particularly cared about Reina's exam performance, but because Draxian social structures involved loyalty to pack members, and they'd known Zixtal since hatching. Their names were Krell, Vesa, and Thone, and they represented varying degrees of going along with a bad idea because friendship. The location was chosen with mathematical precision. The maintenance tunnels that connected the Academy's primary academic buildings were rarely used by students, poorly monitored by security systems, and had convenient access points that could be blocked to prevent intervention. Calculated a 94.7% probability of success with only a 2.3% chance of serious consequences. His math was excellent. His understanding of humans was catastrophically insufficient. Advanced quantum mechanics let out late in the station's artificial evening cycle, after Professor Thelian had finished a lengthy tangent about the philosophical implications of wave function collapse that had somehow involved references to extinct species, ancient wars, and a surprisingly passionate defense of determinism. Renee packed her datapad, said goodbye to the Flizian student she'd been studying with, and headed toward the dormitory wing. She had plans involving leftover pizza that the cafeteria had learned to make after she provided detailed instructions, a new novel she downloaded, and approximately 8 hours of sleep before her next class. The maintenance tunnel was a shortcut she discovered in her first semester. It cut 5 minutes off the walk and was usually empty. The lighting was dimmer here, just enough to navigate by, and the walls were lined with various pipes and conduits that hummed with the station's vital systems. She was halfway through when she heard the door seal behind her. Renee stopped, turned, and found 4 Draxians blocking her path back. Another look forward revealed the exit was similarly blocked by a debris container that definitely hadn't been there this morning. "Oh, come on," she said, in the tone of someone who'd really hoped to avoid exactly this situation. "Really? Is this about the exam?" Zixtal stepped forward, his scales reflecting the dim lighting in a way that was probably meant to be intimidating. "Your performance was statistically impossible. I got lucky," Renee said, which was partly true. "Good day, solid breakfast. Happened to see the right pattern." "It happens. Humans don't see patterns. Humans guess randomly and occasionally succeed through probability." "Sure, let's go with that. Can I leave now? I have pizza waiting and it's going to get cold." Krell, positioned to Zixtal's left, made a hissing sound that translated roughly to laughter. "The Deathworlder thinks she can just leave." "I mean, I was hoping," Renee said, her brain already running calculations of her own. 4 Draxians, each roughly 40 kg heavier than her, with natural armor and claws. Tunnel was narrow, which limited their ability to surround her but also limited her escape routes. No weapons. But then again, humans didn't really Need weapons. But I'm getting the sense this is going to go differently. You will withdraw from advanced quantum mechanics, Zixtal said. You will admit your solution was a statistical fluke. You will acknowledge Draxian intellectual superiority. Or what? Or we will file a formal complaint documenting your aggressive behavior when confronted about academic dishonesty. Renee blinked. That's actually pretty clever. Frame me as the aggressor, you species. Bias to support your claims, get me expelled. Okay. Not bad, still not going to work. Though, you will comply. See, here's the thing, Renee said, settling her weight in a way that her high school basketball coach would have recognized as defensive stance. I really don't want to fight you. Fighting is messy, someone gets hurt. There's paperwork, my parents would be disappointed. But you've blocked both exits, you're threatening me, and you're between me and my pizza. Vesa, the smallest of the four Draxians at only 1.9 m, hissed something in their native language. She's attempting to intimidate us. Thon translated helpfully, the she says. We should recalculate. Your threat displays are irrelevant. Zixtal said. We have numerical advantage, mass advantage, reach advantage, and environmental control. Probability of your success is 0.3%. You know what's funny about probability? Renee asked. It's just a guess dressed up in math. Zixtal reached for her shoulder, claws extended, probably intending to grab and intimidate. His claw touched her jacket. Here's what happened next from a biological perspective. Renee's autonomic nervous system, which had been monitoring the situation with the paranoid efficiency of 4 billion years of evolution, decided that the threat had escalated from potential to immediate. Her adrenal glands released epinephrine and norepinephrine into her bloodstream. Her heart rate spiked from 70 beats per minute to 180. Blood flow redirected from digestive and reproductive systems to major muscle groups. Her pupils dilated for better visual acuity. Time perception altered as her brain shifted into high processing mode. Her liver dumped glucose into her bloodstream for immediate energy access. Basically, Renee's body activated its built-in combat mode, which had been refined over millions of years of surviving on a planet where everything wanted to eat you. From an external perspective, what happened was this. Renee moved. She grabbed Zixtal's extended arm with both hands, twisted her hips using the rotational force that human spinal flexibility allowed, and threw him into the tunnel wall using a hip toss that every student in her middle school self-defense class had practiced approximately 500 times. Draxians were tough. Their scales could resist most environmental hazards, and their bones were reinforced with calcium phosphate, structures that made them incredibly durable. None of this helped when 75 kg of human, accelerated by Earth gravity trained muscles and leverage principles that worked regardless of species, applied force directly to their center of mass. Zixtal hit the wall with a sound like a drum filled with rocks. Several scales cracked. His left arm made a sound that suggested things had moved in directions they weren't supposed to move. Elapsed time 1.8 seconds. Renee released him and turned to face the other 3 Draxians. Last chance to recalculate. Krell operating on the kind of pack. Loyalty that overrode survival. Instincts lunged forward with claws. Extended and jaws open, going for intimidation through display of natural weapons. Renee ducked under the claw swipe, which had been telegraphed by approximately 3 different preparatory movements that her brain had unconsciously tracked. Her fist came up in an uppercut that had roughly 150 kg of force behind it, aimed at the underside of Krell's jaw, where Draxian anatomy had a nerve cluster that controlled equilibrium. Krell's head snapped back. His eyes lost focus. He stumbled backward, disoriented, and collapsed against a coolant pipe. Elapsed time 3.2 seconds. Vesa and Thon looked at each other, then at Renee, then at their 2 pack members who were decidedly not winning. "I really recommend running," Renee said helpfully. They charged together, which showed tactical thinking but poor threat assessment. The tunnel was narrow enough that they couldn't attack from different angles. Effectively, they came at her in a staggered formation, Vesa slightly ahead, both moving with a coordinated precision that came from Draxian pack hunting instincts. Renee waited until the last possible moment, then dropped low and swept Vesa's forward leg using a move that her capoeira instructor had taught her during the summer. She'd been really into Brazilian martial arts. Vesa went down hard, sprawling across the tunnel floor. Thon, unable to stop his momentum, tripped over Vesa. This would have been comedic if Renee hadn't immediately followed up with an elbow strike to Thon's shoulder joint that targeted the specific pressure point where Draxian scales were thinnest. She'd learned about this weakness in Xenobiology 201 and had thought at the time that it was interesting but probably not useful information. Turns out it was very useful. Thon roared in pain, his arm going temporarily numb from nerve disruption. Vesa tried to get up. Renee's foot came down on her tail, pinning her in place. Not enough force to break anything, but enough to make it clear that continuing was a bad idea. Total elapsed time from first contact: 11 seconds. Renee stood in the maintenance tunnel, breathing hard, surrounded by 4 Draxians in various states of injury and regret. Her knuckles hurt where she'd punched Krell. Her jacket was torn where Zixtel had grabbed her. She had approximately 15 different bruises forming where she'd made contact with scaled bodies. "Okay," she said to the groaning forms. "Okay, everyone alive, nobody dying. Good, great, let's keep it that way." She pulled out her data pad with shaking hands and activated the emergency medical beacon. Then she sat down with her back against the wall and tried to remember the breathing exercises from her meditation app while her heart rate slowly returned to normal. The Academy's emergency response team arrived in 6 minutes, which was actually impressive, considering they had to navigate through maintenance tunnels that weren't designed for rapid transit. What they found would later require 4 separate investigation boards and the creation of 17 new safety protocols. Scene: 1 maintenance tunnel in section Delta 7. 1 human student, minor abrasions, elevated heart rate, showing signs of acute stress response, but otherwise uninjured. 4 Draxian students, various injuries including fractures, nerve damage, concussion-like symptoms. and trauma to scales and underlying tissue. Security Officer Plenthak, Aquelin, whose species prided themselves on logical analysis and who was currently questioning the logical foundation of his entire career, stared at the scene for a full 10 seconds before speaking. "Explain," he said, in the tone of someone who wasn't sure any explanation would make sense. Raina looked up from her data pad, where she'd been stress reading her novel to avoid thinking about what had just happened. "They blocked both exits, threatened me about my exam score, demanded I withdraw from my class, and attempted physical coercion. I defended myself using reasonable force. Nobody died. I called for medical help immediately. Can someone please make sure they're okay?" Plenthak looked at the 4 Draxians being attended to by medical technicians. He looked at the human, who appeared to have maybe 15% of any single Draxian's body mass. He looked at his scanner, which was showing that the tunnel's security monitoring had been disabled through manual override. 4 Draxian students, he said slowly. "I counted 4, yes. Approximately 350 kg combined mass. I didn't weigh them. You fought 4 Draxian students in a confined space. I defended myself against 4 Draxian students who attacked me first. There's a legal distinction, and I'm really hoping the Academy cares about it." Plenthak activated his communicator. "I need Administrator Veles at Delta 7. Immediately. And get me a human physiology specialist and the legal department. All of the legal department and someone who understands Earth gravity calculations." "Am I in trouble?" Raina asked quietly. "Everyone is in trouble," Plentek said. "Different kinds of trouble. But mostly, I need to understand how our threat assessment algorithms failed this catastrophically. The investigation took 9 hours and involved 6 different departments, 4 species of medical experts, and enough documentation to crash the Academy's filing system twice. The Draxian students, once stabilized and coherent, provided their version. They had attempted to discuss academic concerns with the human, who had responded with unprovoked violence. Raina provided her version. They had trapped her, threatened her, attempted physical intimidation, and she defended herself using techniques learned in standard Earth education. The physical evidence was damning. The tunnel exits had been deliberately blocked. Security monitoring had been disabled using Zixtal's student credentials. Medical scans showed that Raina had struck with precision, targeting specific anatomical weaknesses, rather than causing maximum damage. If she'd wanted to seriously hurt them, she could have. That last part made several investigators need to sit down. Administrator Veles, a Tauran whose species was known for diplomatic grace, and who currently had none of it, reviewed the evidence in her office, while 3 different stress management systems tried to keep her biochemistry stable. "Let me understand the situation," she said, looking at the human students sitting across from her desk. "You're telling me that Earth schools teach violence to children. We call it physical education and self-defense training," Raina said. "It's pretty standard curriculum. We also learn reading, math, science, history, art, music. The physical stuff is just one part. For what possible reason? Health, fitness, confidence, personal safety. I don't know, it's just what we do. Most species don't have PE. Velis pulled up the Earth education file that had been provided during humanity's integration. She scrolled through it, her chromatic skin shifting through colors that indicated increasing distress. Your children are taught combat techniques starting at age 5. We're taught basic movement, coordination, and body awareness. The self-defense stuff usually starts around age 10 or 12. You have competitive sports where children physically compete against each other. Yeah, sports are fun: soccer, basketball, volleyball, track and field. Do other species not have sports? Not ones that involve deliberate collision or combat. Oh, well, that explains why the Flisian students look so confused when I tried to explain football. Velis closed the file before her stress management systems gave up entirely. You're classified as a high danger species. The algorithm placed humans at 847 on the danger index. I've heard. Seems a bit high, honestly. We're not that scary. You just defeated 4 Draxian students in 11 seconds. They attacked me, Reyna pointed out. I didn't want to fight. I tried to leave. They literally blocked the exits. I believe you, Velis said, and meant it. Which presents a complicated situation. You defended yourself within legal parameters. You used appropriate force. You immediately called for medical assistance by every measure of academy law. You acted correctly. But you hospitalized 4 students using techniques you learned as a child, and you're telling me you're average in these capabilities. Renee thought about her high school gym class, where she'd been decent but not exceptional. Pretty average, yeah. I was never the best athlete. Made the basketball team, but mostly warmed the bench. Got a B in self-defense class. Velis made a note that was probably going to result in a complete overhaul of the danger index. The Draxian students violated multiple regulations, she continued. They'll face academic discipline, possible expulsion, and mandatory courses on threat assessment and species interaction. They disabled security systems with premeditation, which adds additional charges. What happens to me? You continue your education, Velis said, with modifications to ensure this doesn't happen again. The modifications were extensive and slightly ridiculous. First, Renee was assigned a security escort, not for her protection, but to provide other students with visible reassurance that the human was being monitored. The escort, a Yanari named Leth, spent most of his time being confused about whether he was protecting Renee or protecting everyone from Renee. Second, the Academy implemented new protocols for managing high-danger species students. These included designated safe interaction zones, mandatory briefings for all students on appropriate engagement parameters, and a complete redesign of the threat assessment algorithm that removed the comforting fiction that danger could be accurately predicted. Third, and most annoyingly to Reyna, she was required to submit weekly reports on her physical activity levels after someone calculated that humans needed regular exercise to maintain psychological stability. This led to the Academy building a gymnasium that was essentially reinforced bunker where Reyna could work out without terrifying anyone. The story spread through the Academy like a particularly aggressive rumor. Virus. Within 2 weeks, every student had heard some version of what happened in Delta 7. The details got more elaborate with each retelling. By the end of the semester, campus legend suggested Raina had fought off a dozen Dractions while solving quantum equations in her head. She denied these versions. Nobody believed her denials. Reality was less interesting then. Mythology. Applications from human students too. Nexus Prime increased by 60% in the following cycle. The Confederation's Education Board was still determining if this was cause for celebration or concern. The Danger Index was officially revised. Humans were reclassified at 923 with a footnote that read, previous assessment insufficient. Recommend extreme caution and updated protocols for all educational institutions. Raina completed her degree in quantum mechanics with highest honors. Her thesis on intuitive problem solving challenged several mathematical foundations and was both praised for innovation and criticized for being insufficiently rigorous. She gave her graduation speech to an audience that applauded enthusiastically. From a respectful distance, the 4 Draxian students all graduated, eventually, from different institutions, with a new appreciation for the limits of mathematical prediction. Zixtal reportedly became a researcher in chaos theory, though whether this was genuine intellectual growth or trauma response remained a matter of debate. The maintenance tunnel in Delta 7 was sealed and converted into a storage facility. A small plaque was installed that read, Site of the 3047 incident. Proof that probability is not certainty. And Nexus Prime Academy, the most calculated, predicted, and controlled educational environment in known space, added a new line to its safety protocols. When dealing with Deathworld species, remember that statistics don't account for improvisation, intuition, or the fact that some beings were raised by a planet actively trying to kill them. The universe ran on predictability, order, and the comforting belief that mathematics could explain everything. Humans ran on caffeine, stubbornness, and the evolutionary inheritance of surviving on a planet that treated sentient life as an interesting challenge. Turned out the universe needed to update its assumptions. Final entry from the revised Danger Index. Species Homo sapiens human. Origin Earth Sol System. Classification Class 12 Deathworld. Danger Rating 923/1000. Notable characteristics: bipedal endoskeletal. Remarkable capacity for adaptation and improvisation. Possess biological combat enhancement. System adrenaline response. Trained in physical competition and self-defense from early development. Capable of intuitive problem solving that defies algorithmic prediction. Recommended protocols: approach with respect. Do not threaten. Do not assume mathematical advantage translates to actual advantage. Do not interfere with their food or sleep schedules. Absolutely do not attempt physical intimidation. Additional note: previous rating of 847 was revised after the Delta 7 incident demonstrated catastrophic failure of predictive models. Current rating of 923 is provisional. It may require further adjustment. The committee notes with some concern that humans consider themselves not that Scary, and that most human students report. Being average in combat capability. We have decided not to investigate what above average humans are capable of. Some questions don't need answers. Final observation. In a galaxy that runs on predictability, humans represent chaos. This is either terrifying or refreshing, depending on your perspective and insurance coverage. The galaxy learned an important lesson. That year, mathematics could predict orbital mechanics, quantum probabilities, and stellar evolution. It could not predict what happened when you cornered a human in a dark tunnel. Some variables were incalculable, and that was probably for the best.